Hi everyone, and welcome to Bygone Traditions. Today we're going to can potatoes. When I can potatoes, I peel my potatoes, then dice them into 1-inch cubes, and I put them in a container of water like this to keep them from turning brown. Next, usually when I'm about halfway through, because this is about 20 pounds of potatoes, when I'm halfway through peeling the potatoes, or not peeling them, but cutting them up, I get a pot of water going until it's to a boil. Once it's to a boil, I will blanch these potatoes in the water for about 2 minutes and then transfer them over into a clean bowl using this sieve. I also boil some water, which is boiling now, so I can take this and I pour it over my lids. I'm using tattler lids today. You could do this with your regular ball lids. This is just the lids I prefer to use. And I have filled my canner with about 2 to 2.5 inches of water. I'm going to be using quart-sized jars today. No pint-sized jars today. I usually just can my potatoes in quart-sized jars because the size of the family, and that's what we use per meal. Alright, so I'm going to walk you through this step by step. First we're going to wait for our water to start boiling, but once it's boiling, I will scoop out about 2 sievefuls of the potatoes, and I will place them into this boiling water, and then once it's been boiling for about 2 minutes, I will then transfer them into this bowl and then repeat the process. Wait for the water to boil, put 2 sievefuls of potatoes in here, wait 2 minutes, then take them out and transfer them into this clean bowl. And I'll do that until all the potatoes are done, and then I can get my jars out of the dishwasher because they've been sitting there staying warm, and we can proceed to fill the jars. I have found that the potatoes, without blanching them first, will suck up a lot of the water in the jar, so you won't have as much liquid in the jar when you pull the jars out, and sometimes it can turn the potatoes a little brown, and I don't really like that. I like there to be a little more water in my jar covering most of my potatoes. I do usually lose a little bit of water, but it's only about that much, and that's fine. It's perfectly safe. You don't want your jar to have less than half the liquid left in the jar. If that's the case, then you just need to use that jar because the seal is not going to last. But if you lose a little bit, as long as the seal is still good, you're fine. Just know that the halfway mark is right about the lowest you want the water to go. Okay, so our water is boiling, and I'm going to scoop out. I'm going to let it drain a little bit. 2 of these. Use 2 scooperfuls of this. And then this will sit in here for 2 minutes. I'm actually going to do 3 because it's so full. So I'm going to let that sit for 3 minutes, and then we will transfer it over into the bowl. Okay, so these have been in here for 3 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and pull them out and put them into the clean bowl and add another 2 scoops of potatoes. So I will do that with the rest of these potatoes, and then I'll get back to you when I'm ready to can. So now I have all the potatoes done. I have my hot jars, I have my hot potatoes, and I have what I use. You can use hot water to fill up the rest of the way, or you can use, I use a onion soup mix. So I take a dry onion soup mix, I put about a tablespoon of onion soup mix in a cup of water. So here, just in case I don't have enough, I made 22 cups of onion soup mix. And I have my salt, which I will add a teaspoon of salt to each jar as well. So we are going to fill up the jars to a 1-inch headspace, and then I will fill with water, I will clean my rims, and I will put the lids on. Something else I forgot to say is I like to use wide mouth jars, because when you go to use the potatoes, it's much easier to get them out of these jars than it is the regular size mouth jars. I do get all of my potatoes from Azure. I did not grow these. I don't have the space to grow enough potatoes to feed our family. So I use go through a company called Azure Standard. They tend to have a lot of really great bulk organic foods that I can get from them. It's a delivery service, and I drive to a place to meet the truck, and I pick up my food, and I come home with it. And when I did my carrots, that's where I got my carrots from, and this is where I got my potatoes from. It's a really wonderful company. I love using them. I can get bulk flour and rice, potatoes, carrots. I live kind of far, so I don't really do their produce like lettuce. It doesn't seem to last as long, or it doesn't seem to show up in very good condition when I order it. So I don't really get the lettuce or things that go bad pretty quick. I tend to just do like the hearty root vegetables when I order from them. But you can get all kinds of great things. It's a really great company. Looks like I'm going to have some potatoes left for dinner tonight, which is good. I won't be able to fill that up into another jar, so this is good. I try to use whatever leftover of the stuff I can that I have for dinner, because after a long canning day, nobody really feels like making dinner. And so it's nice to have a little extra so that you can lighten your load in the evening, and you don't have to do as much cooking that day, which is really nice. I can fit one more potato in here. That looks good. So the 1-inch headspace, when you're looking at your jar, it's usually right, I usually put it just below this line. So if you look at this jar here, I usually feel it's right there. That's about 1-inch headspace. It's just perfect. And so now we're going to go through and fill it with our, well, actually, I'm going to put my teaspoon of salt in each jar. This is completely optional. You do not need to put salt in it. I find that it adds some flavor to the potatoes, so you're not getting super bland potatoes, because sometimes they're bland. That is why I use the onion soup mix as well, because I find it helps the flavor of the potato. I have done just plain potatoes before, and I find that I just don't really like them too much. I like having just a little bit of flavor into my potatoes, and these with the onion soup mix makes really, really yummy roasted potatoes. And that's what I like to use these for. I imagine you can use it for like potato salad. I would think this would make a great potato salad. So we gotta make sure we also debubble these to make sure all the liquid and air is settled and all the air bubbles are out of the jar. Let's see, that did release some air, so I'm gonna have to add just a little more. With the tattler lids, you really want to make sure you're very careful about your headspace in your jar. It's very important. It's very important no matter what. But the tattler lids they're a little finicky with sealing if you don't have your headspace low enough. If it's too high, especially with potatoes, you will absolutely get siphoning. Your jars won't seal. it's a waste of all your time and effort when your jars aren't sealing properly, which is sad. So just make sure you debubble those. Make sure you've got the right headspace. If you have too much, don't be afraid to take any liquid out. It's perfectly fine. It's not going to hurt anything to remove liquid from your jar. Just add it to another jar. It looks like I got 12 jars out of this. I did have to toss a couple of the potatoes because they were bad. So I'm thinking 20 pounds would probably get you about 14 to 16 jars of potatoes, quart-sized jars of potatoes. You can also cut these up in a fry shape. So you can cut them up as French fries and can them that way. I do enjoy that. It's nice. It's a quick French fry for hamburger night. Or, you know, I mean, these are practically like French fries. They're just diced, not sliced. So, but you do need to make sure that they're a thick sliced fry, because if they're not thick enough, they will fall apart on you. You know, onion soup mix is also a really great thing to put in your hamburger meat when you're going to can it. It adds a lot of flavor. It makes it taste really good. Sometimes canned burger meat can taste kind of off, almost like a, I guess I've heard dog food type of texture, or not texture, but flavor. And the onion soup mix definitely gives it a better flavor. Okay, so that's done. Now we're ready for the lids. We have to clean the rims, and then we will put the lids on. So I have my vinegar here, and I have a cheesecloth that I use, and I just clean the rims here. This is a great time to check for any cracks in your rims. If you have a cracked rim, just use a new jar. Not a problem, but you don't want to use a cracked rim in your canner because it will cause a faulty seal, and you don't want that with your food. Not after you worked so hard to get this all taken care of and in your canner, to have your jar not seal on you, and then now you just left to have to use that jar right away. So here we go. I'm using my tattler lids today. In my last video on carrots, I did show you how to use these lids. You just make sure that gasket is down around the lid all the way. Set it right on there. You take your ring, kind of make sure this is centered, and I hold that there and then twist until it wants to spin on the counter, and that's done. That is ready to go into the canner. Okay, I get the rest of these on here. I'm ready to put all these jars into this canner. The jars are loaded. I am now going to take my lid and check that valve. See if we can see through that. See, it's clear. Okay, I think I have my canner turned around. Hold on just a second. Okay, so I got my canner facing the right way. I like to see the arrow here so that I can see the dial, and I like to have that facing outwards towards me. I had it facing towards the sink. Okay, so we're going to put this lid on. Remember, we want even spacing. We want the arrow to line up with this line right here. This is the All-American canner. So this is a weighted gauge canner. I have to make sure that everything all the way around is spaced properly. I just move the lid as I feel it needs proper spacing. And I kind of eyeball it. If you don't have proper spacing, air will vent from between the lid and the pot, and you will not get a proper seal on your pressure canner, and then your canner will not go up to pressure, and you will have food that has not been pressure cooked properly and could potentially cause issues and not be safe. So it's very important you have this lid on properly. So now we're going to tighten down the clamps evenly, and we do that by doing the opposite clamps on either side. And try and clamp them down evenly. And I'm just going to check all of that, make sure. Yep, all even Steven. Yay. Okay. I'm just going to tighten all these, make sure they're tight. Looks good. Okay, so we're going to let this vent. We're going to let it heat up on almost high until it starts venting. Once it's at a full vent, we will let this vent for 10 minutes. Once it's at 10 minutes, this is going to, for the weighted gauge, be at 10 pounds of pressure at sea level, or on a dial gauge, it will be at 11 pounds of pressure. Once this weighted gauge is on, we wait for it to start rattling. Once it's rattling about 4 times a minute, or just kind of off and on for a minute, but it needs to at least be 4 times a minute, we're going to start our timer for 40 minutes. And we'll let this go for 40 minutes. Once the 40 minutes is up, I'm going to turn off the burner. I am not going to touch anything on this canner, and I'm going to let this come down by itself to 0. If I touch anything on this canner, there is a possibility of siphoning out of the jars and unsealed jars. There's also a big chance of having lots of broken jars. I know because I've done it. I canned a whole batch of green beans once when I was new to this, and I didn't realize I had to leave this on and let that come to 0. Instead, I just took this off, hoping it would go faster, and I had a lot of cracked jars. So all of the effort I put into canning my green beans was almost ruined, and it was very sad, and I was so sad about that. Also, if you have really hard water, or I would just as a precaution, put about 1/4 cup of vinegar into your canner when you do fill it with the water, because it will keep hard water deposits off of your jars. It'll keep your jars looking nice and pretty. You won't have that cloudy ick on your jars. That's really, really hard to get off. So let's just wait. Once this comes up to pressure, I'll come back. We'll put the weight on, and then we'll let it go for 40 minutes after it starts rattling properly. And once that's done, we'll turn it off, let it sit for probably about 30 minutes is what it takes to come down to 0, 30 to 40 minutes. Once that's down, we'll remove the vent, let it sit another 10 minutes, or not remove the vent, remove the weighted gauge, let that sit for another 10 minutes. Then we will crack the canner, let it sit for another 15, and then we will take the lid off and remove the jars, tighten down the lids, and we'll be done. Okay, so this is at a full vent. We're going to let this go for 10 minutes, and then we can put the weighted gauge on. so this has been going for about 10 minutes now. I'm going to put this weighted gauge on the 10 mark, and I'm just going to cover it like that. And then we're going to wait for it to start rattling. Once it's rattling at a good rate, then I will start my timer for 40 minutes. So this is rattling right around where I like it. Now, it isn't doing 4 rattles a minute. It's just continuously rattling, which I'm good with, because I know that that's at pressure and that it isn't under pressure, and so my temperature is good for canning these potatoes, and it's safe. So I'm going to let this go for 40 minutes, and then once the 40 minutes is up, I will turn the burner off and let this sit until it comes down to 0 pressure. I just wanted to let you know you need to stay within earshot of this rattling so that you know that it hasn't gone under 4 rattles per minute. If it does go under 4 rattles per minute, you need to start this process all over again. So you will need to bring this back up to pressure gently. You don't want to do it too quickly, or else you will have some issues with cracked jars and jars not sealing. So stay within earshot. If it does come down, slowly bring it back up to pressure until it's rattling again at the place you want it. You can restart your stock at that point for another 40 minutes so that you are pressure canning this properly, so that you get rid of all the bacteria and all of the mold in these jars. That's very important. It's very important you follow those rules so that your canning is safe, and then you aren't having any issues with any of the bacteria in your food. Okay, so our 40 minutes is up, so I'm going to turn off the burner. So this will come down to 0 pressure, and I will take the weighted gauge off of the valve. The canner is now down to 0 pressure, so now I'm going to remove this weighted gauge and let this vent for 10 minutes. It's been 10 minutes, so now we're ready to crack the canner. So I'm going to unscrew these. This one's kind of screwed on tight. Opposite sides, again, just like I screwed it on. Okay, so now I have all of these unscrewed. So now I'm going to turn this and gently pick it up and leave it cracked. And we're going to wait another 15 minutes. We're now ready to take the lid off and get our jars out of the canner and onto the counter. Remember to always lift the lid away from you so that you don't burn yourself with the steam. Okay, I'm going to remove these jars from the canner. And I'll just lift them out and tighten them down. You have to lift them straight out. So you don't want to have any siphoning happening. You want to leave about a 2-finger width spacing between each jar so they have proper air circulation. Okay. Looks like I had a little bit of siphoning from a jar. I love these gloves. I got them on Amazon and they are pretty amazing. Okay. Looks like they did pretty well. I have just a couple jars that are a little bit low on liquid, but overall it looks good. We'll see you tomorrow when we take these rings off and clean up the jars. Okay, so it's the next day, and these are ready to be cleaned and labeled. So I need to take the rings off of all of these first, make sure that they are sealed. So far, so good. I just check the seal by picking it by the lid. If the lid doesn't pop off, then it's a good seal. to share with you was loss of water in your jars. So I'm going to come closer to you. See how this has lost some water? Remember, I filled these up to here. A lot of times the potatoes soak up some of the water, so you will have some water loss. This is perfectly safe. You don't want the water loss to be below this point. Once it's below that point, it is not safe, and you need to make sure that you use it right away. So I would store it in the fridge if your water loss is too low. But at this point right here, totally fine. You just don't want to lose more than half your jar of liquid. It helps keep the pressure in the jar. As you can see, these are sealed. They're perfectly safe, they're perfectly fine, but you do not want to lose more than half your water. If you do, just use your food right away that you've made and make sure that it's stored in the fridge. Once all the rings are off, you can wash these off with warm soapy water. Okay, and then we just dry them off, and then we can label them. And once they're labeled, then we can store them in a cool, dry place that is away from the sunlight. And you're good to go, and that would complete your canning process. So I'll just show you how I label these. Give you an example real quick. So I have this chalk marker that I got from, I believe, Michael's. And all I do is put diced potatoes, and then I put the month, and the month is May, and so that is the 5th month, and then I put the year, which is 2022. And that's how I label these. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my video on canning potatoes, and I will see you next time.